If you were looking to take a cruise and you read comments like this, and this, would you still want to go on the cruise? What happens if you carried on reading and you read comments like, you'll never get seasick on a cruise, nobody gets seasick on a cruise? What would you think? You probably would be pretty confused. There is a lot of contradicting information out there about seasickness. A lot of it comes from people who never get travel sick at all, so I don't know why they feel qualified to talk on the subject, but I've been cruising for years and I've been seasick on a number of cruises, so it definitely does happen. The worst seasickness that I've ever experienced on a cruise happened a few years ago on an MSC cruise ship. Looking back, there are a number of mistakes I made that affected how unwell I felt on this cruise, and I really did feel unwell on this cruise. It was horrible. I am a travel sick person and there's no getting away from that for me. I get sick in cars, I get sick in buses. I can't do any kind of VR headset and you would never get me on a ferry. We were cruising in December and we were actually on board for Christmas Day. The downside of cruising in December though is that the weather is rarely the best. We were cruising in the Mediterranean and storms in December in the Mediterranean are not unheard of. I personally don't regret the time of year I booked this cruise. I had a great time, but many people would say that that was my first mistake. The second mistake that other people would say I made, I don't think that this one really was a mistake, is that I booked a guaranteed inside cabin. A guaranteed cabin is basically where you book a cabin grade, but you don't pay to pick the specific location. The cruise line will just randomly assign a location to you. This means that you're normally, at the front of the ship, at the back of the ship, at the top of the ship, at the bottom of the ship, but that works great for me. We were assigned cabin 10322, which was towards the back of the ship. It wasn't right at the back, and I have had cabins further back before on other cruises, but it probably wasn't the best location for seasickness. Ideally, the best location for seasickness is in the middle of the ship and as low down as you can. Of course, as with everything, it is a case of priorities. For me, I would prefer to save the money and just implement the things I've learned over the years to prevent and treat seasickness. If I have to. I don't go on a cruise assuming that I'm going to get seasick, but it does happen sometimes. I didn't think that I would get seasick on this cruise, but when the captain made an announcement over the tannoy saying that we were expecting bad weather and high winds, I did think about it briefly, not enough to do anything about it. I just carried on eating and drinking and enjoying my cruise. What I should have done at this point is head straight back to my cabin to get my trusty travel sickness pills. If I had done that at this early stage, I don't think I would have ever felt as rough, but I think I was feeling a bit overconfident. I was pretty used to cruising by this point. The majority of cruises I go on, I don't get seasick, so I thought it would be fine. When we booked this cruise, an alcoholic drinks package was part of the promotion. I don't normally pay for alcoholic drinks packages, but if I've booked a cruise and it is automatically included, I'm going to do my best to try any drinks that I want to try. A favourite of mine served on the MSC ships are what are called beer tails. They're basically cocktails, but they are made with beer and cider. My favourite is the spiced apple pie, and I did have quite a few of them on this cruise. They were nice. I think it was a mistake on my part to drink as many drinks as I did drink. I didn't make myself feel unwell by drinking. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't drinking too much, but lining your stomach with bubbly cider cocktails, I don't think is the best thing for seasickness. We went to dinner after this, and I don't remember at what point I left the restaurant, but I didn't make it through all of the courses. Usually when you're on a cruise, you are barely able to feel the ship moving at all. I always forget that I'm on a ship, but for some reason, it was just particularly bad on this cruise. The main restaurants are right at the back of the MSC Meraviglia. I was already not feeling well, my stomach was lined with bubbles, and it was just moving a little bit too much for my liking. At this point, I was thinking to myself that this is fine. All that I need to do is get out of this restaurant, go back to my cabin, take the seasickness pills, and then I'll get on with the rest of my cruise. On every other cruise I've ever been on, that plan has worked perfectly, but it just didn't in this situation. It was too late. I went back to my cabin to lie down, and my brother bought me some bread rolls from the buffet. Thank you so much to my brother. I think bread is just the best thing to eat when you're feeling unwell. It's just the best thing to eat at all, really. I'm a big fan of bread, and MSC do bread very well. I very strongly recommend that if you're taking any cruise, you take travel sickness pills. Even if you've never been travel sick in your life, they are little pieces of magic and they work so unbelievably well. When I take these pills, I feel like what everybody else must feel like, just not getting seasick. It feels like a superpower. It is amazing. Bring them. Personally, these are my favourite brand and I've been taking these for years. There are so many different types of travel sickness pills and you do want to try them because some of them will make you feel drowsy. I took these once recently when I went to a naming ceremony of a new cruise ship. Even that taxi ride of about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I need to take travel sickness pills for that journey. And I managed to stay awake the entire time. And I think I actually drank that day, which you're not supposed to do with travel sickness pills. So, yeah. The travel sickness pills that I take say that you should take them 2 hours before traveling. So you really want to take them as soon as there's any mention of high winds or any potential storm. Take them then. Booking an inside cabin is another thing that people will tell you not to do if you get seasick, and I do kind of agree with this one. I do get seasick and I do always cruise in inside cabins, but if I had the option to pick a balcony cabin in a bad location or an inside cabin in the best location ever, I would pick that balcony cabin. The fresh air that you can get from your balcony is just amazing if you're feeling seasick. On this cruise, my parents were on this cruise too, and they had a balcony cabin. I went there in the evening and sat on the balcony with some fresh air, and that was much appreciated. That was really good. If you are worried about getting seasick though and you can't afford a balcony, that is totally fine. I cruise now, I still choose to pick inside cabins every time I cruise, even though I get seasick. It's very rare I get seasick. And this is me. I get seasick walking over a puddle, as my mum would say, and I still very rarely get seasick on cruises. As the weather got worse, the captain did announce that we would be missing tomorrow's port. At first, I was kind of annoyed by that because all I wanted to do was the ship to dock and the rocking to stop. But missing the port meant that we could go away from the storm and we could go to smooth the seas, which was so much better. Itinerary changes do happen quite a lot on cruises, and there's loads of reasons why your itinerary may change. You kind of just have to go with it. When you're on a cruise, it can be a bit of a magical mystery tour, but I see that as all part of the fun. After eating my seasickness pills, putting on my seasickness band and eating a green apple, I decided it was time to try and get some sleep. Usually for me, if I'm on a cruise and I'm feeling seasick, if I can get to sleep, that's like a big reset button for me, and I almost always wake up feeling back to normal. Eating green apples is good because of the acidity in the apples, and another thing people say that you should eat is ginger. I used to take some ginger biscuits on long car journeys with me, mostly just because they're tasty, but also because ginger, who knows, it may help. I did actually buy some ginger chewing gum once, which was supposed to help with motion sickness. It didn't taste very nice. I wouldn't recommend that one. I don't know if the seasickness bands do anything, and I definitely wouldn't trust them on their own, but at this point for me, it was kind of a all hands on deck, do everything you can. They're really cheap to get, and they're not that uncomfortable, so I thought, why not? Nothing to lose at this point. Stick on the seasickness band too. The way that the ship was moving made it almost impossible for me to stay in bed. Because I had an inside cabin, the beds were basically going across the ship. I don't want you to think that I was actually physically sliding up and down the bed. Even if you're in a bad storm on a cruise ship, things shouldn't be falling off shelves, things shouldn't be rolling around. It just felt like to me my insides were coming up and then dropping down, which is not what you want when you're trying to sleep. It's not pleasant. You may hear things on the ship making little noises, you might hear the coat hangers in the wardrobe kind of clinking, but if things are falling around, the ship has a much bigger problem. Your Britishism of the week is wardrobe. We very, very rarely use the word closet here in the UK. For me, I would call this a wardrobe, I would call this a wardrobe. If it's freestanding, if it's built in, if it's big enough, you would call it a walk-in wardrobe. Let me know please what you would call this where you're from, because to us, it is just called a wardrobe. I knew that I needed to get to sleep, and sleep would make me feel so much better, but the bed was just making me feel so much worse. So what I did was I took my bedding and I made a makeshift bed on the floor. It was surprisingly comfortable from what I remember, but it may just be that I was so tired that I didn't mind. But I put the bed going the other way so that I didn't have to feel that horrible up and down feeling as I was trying to fall asleep. When I got up in the morning, I put everything back so that nobody would ever know that I slept on the floor. And now I'm telling the internet that I did, so I didn't tell anyone at the time. I took an almost identical cruise a couple of years later on this same ship on the MSC Meraviglia. The itinerary was almost exactly the same, and it was within a few weeks of the same time of year. I didn't experience any seasickness at all. It was amazing smooth seas, but it's just a gamble you take with cruising sometimes. I still book guaranteed inside cabins because I love them, but I will always keep my seasickness tablets close by, a green apple if I can, and I will try to limit how many bubbly cidery cocktails I put in my stomach. If you're on a cruise like this one where your itinerary is changed due to bad weather or any other reason, you may be able to get something that is called missed port compensation. It's a lump sum per port that you miss. To find out how you get that and what other benefits you can get, watch this video next.